Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The grandfather clock in the hallway had just chimed 11, each stroke seeming to deepen the quiet of our little suburban home. I was curled up on the sofa, a half-finished book of poetry resting on my lap, the soft glow of the reading lamp painting a warm circle in the otherwise dim living room. My husband, Tom, was away on a business trip, one of those last-minute, can't-be-helped dashes to sort out some supply chain issue in another state. He wasn't due back for 2 more days, and the house always felt a little too large, a little too still, when he wasn't there. I'd just been thinking about making myself a cup of chamomile tea, maybe heading up to bed, when the doorbell rang, and my heart gave a little jump. 11 o'clock was late for unexpected callers in our neighborhood. We weren't the types to have friends just drop by unannounced, especially not at this hour. I put my book aside, the unease prickling at the back of my neck. Through the sheer curtain of the window beside the door, I could see a tall, somewhat bulky silhouette. Not Tom, clearly. He always fumbled for his keys. I moved cautiously towards the door, my slippered feet silent on the wooden floor. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the sudden nervousness I felt. A voice, deep and familiar, but one I'd never heard on my doorstep, certainly not this late, responded. "It's, Arthur Harrison, Tom's boss." "I'm so sorry to disturb you this late, Mrs. Peterson. Is Tom home?" Arthur Harrison, my mind reeled. Mr. Harrison, as I always thought of him, was a figure I knew mostly from Tom's work stories and the annual company Christmas party. A man who commanded boardrooms, who Tom respected, perhaps even feared a little. He was always impeccably dressed, exuding an air of authority and unshakable confidence. What on earth could he be doing here, and why would he ask if Tom was home if he was Tom's boss? Surely he'd know about the business trip. A fresh wave of unease washed over me. Had something happened to Tom? My hand flew to my mouth. "Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice a little breathless as I fumbled with the deadbolt. "Is everything all right? Has something happened to Tommy?" Swung the door open to a man who looked remarkably different from the powerful executive I'd occasionally seen. His usually immaculate suit was rumpled, his tie loosened at the collar as if he'd been tugging at it. His hair, normally perfectly combed, was slightly disheveled, and his face, illuminated by the porch light, looked drawn and tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that I'd never noticed before. He held a battered leather briefcase in one hand, but it seemed more like an afterthought, something he'd forgotten. He was carrying, and oh, no, Tom's fine, as far as I know, he said quickly, his voice lacking its usual booming assurance. It sounded strained. "I mean, he's on the trip. Isn't he the one to Chicago?" "Yes," I confirmed, my initial panic subsiding slightly, replaced by a profound sense of confusion. "He left yesterday morning." Did you need to reach him urgently? I have his hotel number." Mr. Harrison ran a hand through his already messy hair, a gesture that seemed so out of character.
"No, it's not that."
"Not exactly. It's just, may I come in for a moment, Mrs. Peterson?" I apologize again for the hour. It's inexcusably late, but I didn't know where else to go. The words hung in the cool night air. This was Arthur Harrison, a man I imagined had a Rolodex full of important contacts, a man who probably had a driver and a penthouse apartment if he wanted one. My little cul-de-sac seemed an unlikely refuge for him, but the look in his eyes, a mixture of exhaustion and something akin to desperation, was undeniable. It wasn't the look of a powerful CEO. It was the look of a man carrying a heavy burden. "That, of course, Mr. Harrison." "Please come in," I said, stepping back to let him pass. The scent of expensive cologne, now mingled with the faint, stale aroma of what might have been office coffee and stress, drifted in with him. He seemed to fill the small entryway, not just with his physical presence, but with an unspoken weight. He stepped inside, and I closed the door, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. He stood there for a moment, looking around my cozy, slightly cluttered living room as if he'd never seen such a place. His gaze lingered on the family photos on the mantelpiece, the worn armchair that was Tom's favorite, the Afghan I'd knitted lying haphazardly over the sofa. It was a world away from the sleek, modern offices I imagined he inhabited. "Please, have a seat," I offered, gesturing towards the sofa. "Can I get you something water, coffee? I was just about to make some chamomile tea." He looked at me then, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Gratitude, surprise, chamomile tea sounds nice, actually." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." He said my name as if he were tasting it, as if it were unfamiliar. "Please call me Sarah," I said, offering a small, tentative smile. If he was going to be in my living room at this hour, looking like he'd wrestled a bear and lost, formalities seemed a bit absurd. He nodded slowly.
Sarah.
"And please call me Arthur." He set his briefcase down by the leg of the sofa with a soft thud, as if shedding a physical part of his burden. He didn't sit immediately, but stood there looking a bit lost. The powerful aura was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that was startling and strangely, deeply human. I wondered what could possibly have brought him to my door, in this state, in the middle of the night. The story was clearly just beginning, and a part of me, despite the lingering unease, felt an unexpected pull, a need to understand. I went to the kitchen to put the kettle on, my mind racing, the silence from the living room behind me feeling charged with unspoken words. The kettle began its low hum, a comforting, everyday sound in the midst of a very uneveryday situation. As I reached for the tea caddy, selecting the chamomile bags, I glanced back into the living room. Arthur had finally sat down, perching on the edge of the sofa cushion, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to get comfortable. He wasn't looking at anything in particular, just staring straight ahead, his shoulders slightly slumped. The image was so contrary to the confident, almost intimidating figure Tom described from work. Tom often spoke of Mr. Harrison's sharp decisions, his demanding expectations, but also, occasionally, his surprising fairness. Never had he mentioned a hint of this fragility. I carried the tray with 2 steaming mugs back into the living room. The fragrant steam of chamomile and honey filled the air, a gentle counterpoint to the tension that still lingered. I placed 1 mug on the coaster before him and settled into the armchair opposite, cradling my own. "Here you go, Arthur," I said softly. He blinked, as if coming back from a distant thought.
Thank you, Sarah.
"This is very kind." He picked up the mug, his large hands wrapping around it as if seeking its warmth. He took a slow sip, his eyes closing briefly. When he opened them, they seemed a fraction clearer, a little less haunted. "So," I began gently, not wanting to press, but knowing the silence couldn't stretch forever. "You said Tom is fine. Is it something about work, something urgent?" He shook his head, then paused, as if reconsidering. "It's about work, yes, but not in the way you mean. Not a crisis with a deadline, not a deal gone sour." He took another sip of tea. "It's more personal, I suppose. But it's become tangled up with work, or perhaps work has finally cracked something open. I don't know." He looked down into his mug. "I found out something today. Something that changes, well, it changes a lot of things that I waited. I've learned over the years that sometimes the most important thing you can do is offer a quiet space for someone to fill. Tom, for all his outward cheerfulness, had his moments of needing to unburden himself, and I'd become a good listener. Arthur finally looked up, his gaze meeting mine. There was a raw honesty there that was almost startling. My wife, Eleanor, she wants to leave me. The words were quiet, barely a whisper, but they landed in the cozy room with the force of a physical blow. I felt my breath catch. This wasn't what I had expected. Not even close. Business trouble, yes. A health scare, perhaps. But this was a deeply personal sorrow, the kind that rips a life apart. Oh, Arthur, I murmured, my own heart aching in sympathy. I am so sorry. He gave a small, humorless laugh.
Yes, so am I.
He stared into his tea again. We've been married for 35 years. 35 years, Sarah. I thought we were solid. Maybe not wildly passionate anymore, like in the movies, but comfortable. Companions. And then today, she just laid it out.
Calmly.
Said she hasn't been happy for years. Said she feels invisible. Said she wants a chance to find herself again, before it's too late. He recited her reasons like a man who had been replaying them in his head over and over, trying to make sense of them. The powerful CEO was gone. In his place was a bewildered husband, his world tilting on its axis. Invisible, I echoed softly, the word resonating with a pang of familiarity that I hadn't expected. There were times, especially since the kids had grown and left home, when I'd felt that way myself, a faint outline in my own life. He nodded, his eyes fixed on some distant point. That's what she said. That I'm always at work, or thinking about work. That even when I'm home, I'm not really there. That she's just part of the furniture. He sighed, a ragged, weary sound. And the damnable thing is, I think she might be right. I've poured everything into the company. Building it, growing it. I thought I was doing it for us, for our future, for the family. He looked around my living room again at the comfortable lived-in space. You and Tom, you seem to have a good life here. A real life, his words struck me. We did have a good life, Tom and I. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but at its core, it was built on a foundation of shared experiences, of listening, of being present for each other. It wasn't always perfect, but we worked at it. Arthur's confession made me suddenly fiercely grateful for what I had and deeply saddened for what he was losing, or had perhaps already lost without realizing it. Running a company that size, it must be all-consuming, I said, trying to offer some understanding, though I couldn't truly fathom the pressures he must face. It is, he admitted. Or I allowed it to be. I always told myself it was necessary, that the sacrifices were worth it. We have a beautiful house, financial security, respect in the community, all the things I thought mattered. He shook his head slowly. But I think I lost sight of what truly holds value. Eleanor. My marriage, he paused, and then said, I drove around for hours after she told me. Just drove. I couldn't go home. The house felt alien.
Hostile even.
And I couldn't think straight. My mind kept cycling through meetings, profit margins, strategic plans, as if trying to find a business solution to a broken heart. He looked up at me, a plea for understanding in his tired eyes. And then, I don't know why, I thought of Tom. He's a good man, solid. He talks about you, you know. Not often in a work context, but little things. How you're redoing the garden, or a funny movie you watch together. He always sounds content when he mentions home. The warmth spread through me at his words about Tom. It was nice to know that the small, happy details of our life together were noticed, even by his formidable boss. So, I drove here, Arthur continued. I don't even know what I expected. Maybe I thought Tom would be here, and I could talk to him. Not that I would have known what to say. But then I saw the lights on, and I rang the bell. It was impulsive. Stupid, probably. Not stupid, Arthur, I said gently. Sometimes, when you're lost, any port in a storm feels like the right one. I paused, then asked, what did you do when you got to the office earlier? Or did you not go? And he looked down at his rumpled suit. Oh, I went in, or tried to. After our conversation this morning, I drove to the office. I thought I could lose myself in work, just power through. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour.
Just sat there.
I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs. What was the point? The reports, the meetings, they all seemed so utterly meaningless. He picked at a loose thread on the arm of the sofa. I called my secretary, told her I was ill. Then I started driving again. I ended up at a bar. Had a drink. Maybe two. I don't usually drink much. It didn't help. Just made my head fuzzy. The image of Arthur Harrison, captain of industry, sitting alone in a bar in the middle of the day, trying to numb the pain of his collapsing marriage, was poignant. He had resources, power, influence, but in the face of such personal desolation, none of it mattered. He was just a man, hurting and lost. And your children? I asked tentatively. Have you spoken to Thema? Shadow crossed his face. Our son, Michael, he lives in California. He has his own family, his own life. We're not estranged, exactly, but not close. He always felt I prioritized work over him, too. Maybe he was right. Our daughter, Emily, she passed away 10 years ago. Leukemia. The last words were heavy, laden with an old, still raw grief. Oh, Arthur, I am so terribly sorry, I said, the words feeling inadequate for such a profound loss. Now, the layers of his pain were becoming clearer. A grieving father, a distant son, and now, a wife seeking to leave. It was a heavy load for any one person to bear. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily, she was the light of our lives. When we lost her, I think a part of Eleanor died too. Maybe a part of me did as well. I threw myself even deeper into work. It was a way to cope, I suppose. Or to avoid coping. He looked directly at me, his eyes glistening. Eleanor said today that she feels like she's been living with a ghost for the past decade.
2 ghosts, maybe.
Me and Emily. The silence in the room was profound, filled only by the soft hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the ticking of the grandfather clock, marking time that suddenly felt both precious and cruel. My heart went out to this man, this stranger who had appeared on my doorstep bearing such a weight of sorrow. I reached out, without thinking, and laid my hand gently on his arm. It was a simple gesture, meant to offer some small comfort. He didn't pull away. Instead, he covered my hand with his own, his grip surprisingly strong, yet trembling slightly. We sat like that for a moment, 2 people in a quiet living room, connected by an unexpected current of shared humanity, the barriers of employer and employee's wife, of stranger and acquaintance, momentarily dissolved by the raw power of his grief and vulnerability. The night was far from over, and I had a feeling that more revelations were yet to come. His hand over mine was warm, and the slight tremor I felt running through it spoke volumes about the internal storm he was weathering. After a moment, he gently withdrew his hand, as if suddenly aware of the gesture, a faint flush rising on his neck. He cleared his throat. I shouldn't be burdening you with all this, Sarah. It's not fair to you. You have your own life, your own concerns. Nonsense, Arthur, I said, trying to convey sincerity. Sometimes, talking to someone who isn't directly involved can be helpful. A fresh perspective, perhaps, or just a listening ear. And honestly, I don't mind. Tom's away, and the house is quiet. Too quiet sometimes. I gave him a small smile. Besides, what are neighbors for? Even if one of them is the boss, he managed a weak smile in return. Tom is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him too, I replied. Marriage, partnership, it's a garden, isn't it? It needs constant tending. Sometimes you get busy, and weeds start to creep in. If you don't notice them, or ignore them, they can take over. I thought of my own little flower beds outside, how quickly neglect could turn beauty into disarray. It was a simple analogy, but it felt true. Arthur nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I think my garden has been overrun with weeds for a long time. I didn't see it, or didn't want to see it.
He sighed.
Eleanor tried, over the years. Little comments here and there. Suggestions that we take a real vacation, just the two of us, no phones, no laptops. I always had an excuse. A critical deal, a shareholder meeting, a problem only I could solve. His voice was laced with self-reproach. She wanted to take a pottery class together a few years ago.
Pottery.
Can you imagine me? With clay all over my hands, he chuckled, but there was no humor in it. I dismissed it, said I didn't have the time. Now all I have is time and a handful of regrets. It's never too late to learn to see, Arthur, I said softly. Or to learn pottery, for that matter. I meant it as a gentle encouragement, a small ray of hope. He looked at me, a flicker of something like surprise in his eyes. You think so after all this time? After this, I think people can surprise you, I said. And sometimes, a crisis, as painful as it is, can be a catalyst for change. A chance to rebuild. Maybe differently this time. I paused, then asked, what do you want? Arthur, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you wish for? He was silent for a long time, staring down at his hands, which were clasped tightly in his lap. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, measuring the passing moments. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet and raw. I want my wife back. Not just back in the house, but back with me. I want her to look at me and see me, not just the CEO or the man who forgot how to be a husband. I want a chance to undo some of the damage. To show her that I can be the man she married, the man I think I still am, somewhere deep inside. He hesitated. And if that's not possible, then I want to find some peace. Some way to forgive myself for my blindness. His honesty was disarming. There were no corporate buzzwords here, no carefully constructed statements. Just a man, stripped bare of his professional armor, confronting the wreckage of his personal life. I felt a profound empathy for him. It occurred to me that beneath the layers of success and authority, most people carried their own hidden sorrows, their own deep-seated fears and regrets. Have you told Eleanor any of this? I asked gently. What you just told? Mayhay shook his head. When she told me this morning, I was stunned, blindsided. I think I got defensive, maybe even angry. I said things I regret, accused her of not understanding the pressure I'm under. It was not my finest moment. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of deep weariness. I haven't spoken to her since. She's staying with her sister. Perhaps, I suggested carefully, when things have calmed down a little, you could try talking to her again. Not to argue or defend, but just to listen. And to tell her how you feel, just as you've told me. About wanting her back, about your regrets. He considered this. Do you think it would make any difference? I don't know, Arthur, I admitted. But what if it did? What if she's also feeling lost and uncertain, Despite her decisiveness sometimes, when people make drastic decisions, it's because they feel they have no other options left. Maybe hearing your true feelings, your vulnerability, could open a door, however small. He was quiet again, his gaze distant. The tea in his mug must have been cold by now, but he seemed to have forgotten it. The cozy warmth of my living room, the soft lamplight, the scent of chamomile, it all felt like a little pocket of stillness in the midst of his turmoil. I found myself hoping, truly hoping, that he could find a way through this. Not just for his sake, but for Eleanor's too. 35 years was a long time to build a life together. Surely, there had to be something worth salvaging, some embers that could be fanned back into a flame, however faint. "You're a very understanding woman, Sarah," he said finally, his voice a little hoarse. "Tom's mentioned how level-headed you are. I see now what he means." I felt a blush creep up my neck. I just believe in communication. And in second chances when they're truly earned. I took a sip of my own now lukewarm tea. My parents went through a very rough patch when I was a teenager. My father, much like you describe yourself, was consumed by his work. My mother felt neglected, lonely. It almost broke them. Arthur looked at me with renewed interest. "What happened? They started talking," I said simply. "Really talking." My mother wrote my father a long letter, pouring out all her feelings. And he actually listened. He made changes. He started coming home earlier, making time for her, for us. It wasn't easy, and it took a long time to rebuild the trust, but they did it. They're in their late 70s now, and they're more in love than I've ever seen them. I smiled at the memory. It taught me that even when things seem hopeless, there's often a path forward, if both people are willing to walk it. A glimmer of something, not quite hope, but perhaps a lessening of despair, appeared in Arthur's eyes. "A letter," he mused. "She always loved it when I wrote to her. Even just a note. Back when we were courting." He paused. "Perhaps that's not a bad idea." The grandfather clock began to chime midnight. The sound seemed to startle both of us. "Goodness, look at the time," I said. "I've kept you here for ages. You must be exhausted." Arthur stood up a little stiffly. "I should go. I've taken up far too much of your evening, Sarah, and imposed on your kindness more than I had any right to." He picked up his briefcase, which now seemed like a strange, out-of-place accessory. "Not at all, Arthur," I said, standing as well. "I'm glad you felt you could stop by. And please, don't feel like you're alone in this. If you ever need to talk again, or if there's anything at all I can do." I trailed off, not sure what I could possibly offer beyond a listening ear. He looked at me, and for the first time that night, there was a genuine, albeit faint, warmth in his smile.
Thank you, Sarah.
"You have no idea how much this conversation has meant to me. Just to be heard, without judgment. It's been a lifeline." He extended his hand, not for a formal handshake, but in a gesture of sincere gratitude. I took it, and his grip was firm, the earlier tremor gone. As I walked him to the door, a thought occurred to me. "Arthur," I said about Tom. "Does he know any of this about Eleanor?" He shook his head.
No.
"No one at work knows."
I
haven't been able to bring myself to talk about it. It feels too raw, too personal, and, frankly, too much like a failure. "It's not a failure to be human, Arthur," I said gently. "And Tom, he respects you a great deal, but he also has a good heart. He might surprise you with his understanding." Arthur considered this for a moment. "Perhaps. I'll think about it." He opened the door, and the cool night air swept into the hallway. "Thank you again, Sarah. For the tea, for the conversation, for everything. "Get some rest, Arthur," I said. "And please, let me know how things are going if you feel up to it," he nodded. "I will." And then, with a final, weary glance, he stepped out into the darkness and walked towards his car, which I now noticed was parked a little haphazardly down the street. I watched until his taillights disappeared around the corner, then slowly closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. My living room, which had felt so charged with his presence and his pain, now seemed extraordinarily quiet, extraordinarily calm. The scent of chamomile still lingered in the air. I looked at the two mugs on the coffee table, evidence of an encounter I could never have predicted. Tom's boss, Arthur Harrison, a man I'd perceived as distant and unapproachable, had sat on my sofa and shared his deepest vulnerabilities. He had arrived as a powerful executive and left as simply a man, heartsick and searching. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for him, certainly, but also a sense of connection, a feeling that I had, in some small way, helped to ease his burden, if only for a few hours. And there was something else too, a quiet sense of personal discovery. I'd always seen myself as a fairly reserved person, not one to easily step into intense emotional situations with near strangers. Yet tonight I had, and it had felt right. Natural, I tidied away the mugs, my mind replaying fragments of our conversation. His raw grief over his daughter, his bewilderment at his wife's decision, his dawning realization of his own part in the unraveling of his marriage. It was a stark reminder of how fragile happiness can be, and how easily we can lose sight of what truly matters in the rush of our daily lives. As I finally headed upstairs to bed, much later than planned, I thought about Tom. I missed him, and I felt a renewed appreciation for our own relationship, for the way we navigated life's challenges together. I made a mental note to call him in the morning, not just for our usual check-in, but to really connect, to tell him how much I loved him. And I thought about Arthur. I hoped he would find the courage to talk to Eleanor, to write that letter, to fight for his marriage if it was what he truly wanted. More than that, I hoped he would find a way to forgive himself and to rediscover the parts of himself he felt he had lost. His visit had been entirely unexpected, a dramatic interruption to my quiet evening. But the "you won't believe what happened" wasn't about scandal or drama in the way the phrase often implies. It was about a profound, unexpected human connection, a shared moment of vulnerability that had left me with a sense of quiet reflection and, strangely enough, a sense of growth. I had seen behind the facade of a powerful man and found a hurting human being. And in offering comfort, I had perhaps found a new depth within myself. The night had been long, and the reasons for Arthur Harrison's visit were heartbreaking, but as I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a quiet sense of gratitude for the unexpected encounter and a renewed understanding of the complexities of the human heart.